Hi everyone, welcome to the newest video on the channel, and today I'm going to be showing you how I painted the Assault Veteran for a Song of Ice and Fire miniatures game. This is one of the attachments for the Lannister Army, and personally I think this is one of my favourite miniatures. It comes in the starter set with the Lannisters and Starks, and yeah, like I say, I think it came out really nicely. I like the pose, and I also done something a little bit different to what I normally do with my miniatures. So if you like how it looks, please consider liking the video, and let's get straight into it. So as always, when I'm painting any miniatures or characters mostly, what I do is I start with the eyes, so that generally involves me using a white, and then what I do is use my finest detail brush and paint two dots either side of the eye. Now there's loads of different ways to do eyes, but I always say painting the eyes at the start is a lot easier than painting it at a later stage because you can make a mess. So as you can see, obviously I've finished doing the white there, and I've made it a bit larger than the eyes actually should be. So what I do is I come in with a black now and just neaten them up. Now this is why I like doing eyes, because now they're actually completely done. So, you know, it only took me a few seconds, a minute max to do the eyes, no hassle, nothing like that. So if you don't normally do the eyes like that, then try that out and it should work fine for you. So once that's done, I come in with the flesh tone. So as you can see, I've got quite a lot of colours in the background there. That's all of the colours that I use when I'm doing flesh tones for characters. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos, what I normally say is you can stop at any stage that you like during this process, but it's nice to take your flesh tone to a higher level, especially when you're doing characters. Now, I know it's obviously a lot more time consuming if you're doing, you know, if you're doing a whole army and you've got 50 figures or so to do, you know, 4 units and a few characters and things like that. It can take a lot of time to do skin tone. So what I would normally do if I'm doing just the normal rank and file model is I'll stop at the third stage of highlighting. Maybe do one more if I want to pick out a few extra details, but generally I'll just stop after the third colour. But for characters, I do all of this process, and it comes out really nice afterwards, especially on this model. I think the face and the skin works really nice on this model. So going back to the actual painting of this guy, what I do with the first colour is obviously a base coat. Now you just want to get a generic colour down. Don't go too crazy with getting complete coverage in the first colour, because obviously we've got all these different colours to come afterwards. So just get a general colour down. Obviously try to get it as smooth as possible. The most important part about this is obviously making sure you don't get any paint on the eyes. Now when painting the face, I'd use a detail brush just to make sure you've got a lot more control than normal. But you know, around the hands and things like that, you can be a bit more you know, messy with it. But again, try to be as neat as possible when you're doing any stages of painting when base coating, just so you get a bit more practice in of, you know, brush control and things like that. So yeah, it's best to be neat as possible on all the stages, and obviously try to keep your paint as smooth as possible. You know, generally with these paints, I just take the paint straight out of the bottle. Now I know there's lots of things that say you know, you should water down your paints and things like that, and that is true in most cases, but some paints are already well you know, mixed with medium and things like that, you know, in the bottle. So sometimes you can kind of guess that it's okay to use. So once that initial base colour is done, I'm coming in with the second colour now, and what I'm doing in this stage is trying to define the areas of the muscle groups on the model. So I'm going to be focusing on the nose, the brow, the cheeks and the lips on the face. So you can see me kind of just being kind of generic in the area. So what I'm kind of doing is, with the base colour, I'm just leaving the darkest colour, the darkest base colour in the areas, in the creases of those areas that I've just mentioned. Obviously in the, because he has a helmet on as well, in the recesses where the skin meets the area of the helmet, you kind of leave a darker area in there as well. Now you don't have to worry too much about this at this stage, because we're going to be doing a wash anyway, but just understanding where the muscle groups are at this stage just makes it a lot easier for you to highlight later on. So with the hands, you can see obviously I'm trying to define where each of the fingers are at this stage as well. The back of the hand, I'm just kind of doing generically. You can see me leave a bit of the darker colour where the you know, the wrist meets the armour on his wrist as well there. So yeah, just kind of notice how and where I'm placing my highlights and how far I'm going with the highlight. I'm not obviously going to extreme edge highlighting. I'm just kind of doing generic muscle groups at this point, just to kind of get an idea of exactly where I'm going to be highlighting at a later stage. So once the second colour's done, I'm coming on to the third colour. Now, like I said, this could be the last stage if you want to. Now, I've painted loads and loads of figures in this Lannister army to this stage, mainly my guardsmen and my halberdiers, also my Knights of Castle Rock as well, actually. But yeah, like I say, this is more than acceptable. So if you were doing this as the last colour on your skin, just be what I would say is just be a lot more lenient with the highlighting, so that you get a kind of stark, more stark contrast between the previous colour and this colour. But if you're going to be carrying on, then just notice how it's the same kind of thing as the last stage, just defining less, less and less every time. Now, this just starts to add a lot more definition and smooth blending to the skin tone. And as we all know, when you pick up a model, especially a character model that's a human, or even non-human models, if you're playing other fantasy games and things like that, you're instantaneously drawn to the face and the base of the model. So that's why I say that it's important to make sure that the skin tone is as nice as possible, or you go to a higher level than you would with any other parts of the model. So you can see how we've only done 3 colours on this skin at the moment. We've taken 5 minutes or so, and if you were doing a whole army of this guy, a whole unit, say with 12 models, it would take you an hour to just do the skin tone to this level. And I think that's a more than acceptable, very nice tabletop standard of skin tone. So if you like the way that this looks, then I do suggest obviously staying at this stage. Now, obviously, when you watch any painting tutorials, you don't have all the paint. So if you did only have 3 skin tones and you wanted to go to a high level, what I'd do is just add white to the last skin tone that you have, just to take it up to like just one brighter colour, and then just use that. So after the fur colour's done, if you're going to be carrying on with this style of skin, what I do is I come in with a flesh wash from Games Workshop. Now, I'm being very, very lenient with this. Now, what I'm trying to do with this colour is just add a bit of warmth to the skin tone and just tie in all of those colours that we've already added, just so that it creates a really, really nice smooth blend. Now, it's very, very important not to get any pooling on this model. Obviously, you want the shade to be settling in the recesses around the the inside of the helmet and things like that, and his hands, obviously in between the fingers and things like that. But again, be careful not to get it on the eyes or anything, and make sure there is no pooling at all, because it will just make it harder for you at this next stage. So once the wash is now dried, and I mean completely bone dry, do not highlight when the wash is still wet. We come on to the 4th colour of the skin. Now, you may think, why have I made you do a wash after doing the 3 colours? Now, this colour, as soon as you completely finish highlighting it, you'll see exactly why it is very important to do the wash. It just adds that other layer of depth to the skin, and also just brings out all the details a lot easier for you to then highlight up from. You can see here where I'm kind of starting to be very, very neat and careful with the face and things like that. Now, like I said at the start of this video, this is one of my favourite poses for the Lannisters in the starter box, and I actually think out of all of the assault veterans, even the Kickstarter veteran with the kind of banner on his halberd, and the assault veteran in the attachments box, the new attachments box, I think this is actually better than all of them. The pose is really nice. It actually looks like it's part of the halberdier unit, and yeah, the face just works really well on the model, and the cape is just another bonus as well. So yeah, I'm starting to kind of pick out all the minor little details now, and you can see the kind of definition that comes in with the face, and also the hands now. So you can see on the back of the hands where I'm kind of doing lines on the actual back of the hand, as well as on the fingers as well. Now, this just adds a bit of definition to the hands, so you can actually kind of see each individual digit. It just kind of adds another level of detail to the hand. Obviously, you want to be careful with this. Obviously, try to keep the lines as straight and as neat as possible when doing this, just to kind of make that smoother transition. You can kind of see how I keep on going back to my my paint pot as well. So, you know, I don't have a lot of paint on my brush at any one time, so I've just got a lot more control than you normally would if you had too much on. So we're getting to the final stages of the skin tone now, and like I say, you can stop at any of these stages. These are more than acceptable skin tones for tabletop miniatures. But the brighter you go, obviously, the more detail and the more smooth transition you get. So you can go even brighter than I do if you like. So again, we're focusing on the main muscle, you know, well, not muscle groups, but the main focal points of the face now, and the hands. So the cheeks, obviously the most sharpest edges and things like that. The nose, I also start painting in the nostrils now as well, just to add a little bit more definition. And yeah, if you've watched any of my other videos as well, you'll also notice that although you may think that these stages, obviously it's going to take really, really long to do these stages, because we're painting less and less of the skin tone at this point in time, it actually doesn't take as long as all the other stages do that are combined. So, you know, what I'd say is if I was going to this level on most models, it would probably take me, you know, 10 to 15 minutes depending on how much skin there is. Obviously not all models have their hands exposed, so it generally is just the face sometimes and things like that. So 10 to 15 minutes per model for this kind of level of painting works really well. I think it's good time invested, and especially if it's just the one-off character, you know, it just feels a lot more rewarding if you take the, you know, certain aspects of the model just to a higher level. You can see how I kind of dragged my paint over my thumb there, just to make sure that I've got a nice sharp tip on my brush. Now these aren't expensive brushes at all, but keeping a nice sharp tip on your brush obviously makes it a lot easier for you to paint sharper details. So now we've got to the final stage now, and this is nearly an almost white. So like I was saying before, if you don't have all of these different skin tones in your, you know, in your paint box and things like that, what you can do is just mix your brightest skin tone with a white. I'd say 50-50, maybe not even 50-50. And then this is essentially the same skin tone color that I'm using right now. Now, obviously, you've got to be careful when you're doing these very, very bright highlights on skin, because if you have too bright a highlight over a color that's not nearly as close on the brightness scale, what it kind of does is it creates a really, really sharp contrast between the colors, and it doesn't look like it's a smooth blend. So if you're kind of struggling with smooth transition of color, it's best to kind of create a mid-tone, just to kind of create a nice smoother transition of color, rather than it being a dark skin type color to like an almost white skin. So you can see here again, I'm just kind of picking out the most prominent edges. Again, it doesn't even take that long this stage, and once I've kind of spun it around and made sure it's all gone, that's the skin color completed. So what I normally do once I've completed the skin on all of my models is just kind of do the main, the bulkiest part of the model with the most color. So this is the red that I've been using for my Lannister Army. Now, it's actually a lot easier. I kind of do regret actually not spraying these guys red to start off with, because it just is a lot easier to do that. But I've basically completed my Lannister Army now, so I've used the whole process throughout. So I'm using this red. Now you can see that it's not got complete coverage over the black. That's fine. You know, you can also see that I've kind of not watered it down completely. That's also fine. What I'm kind of just doing now is kind of getting in the generic groups of color, just so that I know where everything needs to be. Now, if you do spray your models red, obviously it's a lot easier for you to then highlight up. But this color, I'd say if you have other reds, it's probably better than this one. It does actually come out alright in the end. But yeah, if you have different reds, you know, then I'd suggest using them. Now, this red I've used for all of my Lannisters, like I say. So I'm not going to be showing you how I do all my guardsmen, all my Lannister halberdiers and things like that, because this is the exact same process for all of them, just with a few added steps, because he's a attachment model. So it's the same process all the way through. It's just the base color, mid-tone, and a highlight. So it's a quite easy process if you want to kind of follow it. But it's the same process with any red that that you may have at home. So what I kind of do with this stage is, obviously there's loads of different ways you can do the red. You can paint the red on the breastplate. You can paint the red on the shoulder pads, everything like that, even the wrist guards and things like that. So choose where you want the red to be. So this will obviously vary depending on what you want to do with the models. Now, I don't like to have all of the models looking the same, even though they are a uniform army. So choose the groups of the model, the arms, the armor on the front of his body, and choose those areas, and then just paint it this base color red. Now, you may have a generic idea of exactly where you want this red to be on a model, and it may change when you're painting. But generally what I do with this color is the tunic kind of thing, and then the arms, and that's all I do with this red color. So paint those areas just with the base coat, and it's kind of obviously very, very basic, but adds that first punch of color into the model. So you can see there where I've kind of done the first base coat, and then what I do is go over it two times just to get the kind of vibrancy that you see. Now what I'm doing now is I'm just going over the model where I've kind of overspilled the red with black, just so that you can kind of see the detail, what I'm kind of trying to represent. Now once I do the black, obviously that's off camera, I'm now painting the silver on the model. Now the one thing that's guaranteed when you're painting Lannisters is there's going to be a lot of red and there's going to be a lot of silver. Now with this guy, he has more plate than the normal rank and file model, which is nice. So we're just kind of coating those areas. Now you want to be careful obviously at this stage, because we've already painted the red underneath, so just be careful when you're doing that. Again, use a more detailed brush if you don't have full confidence in the the level of control that you have of your brush. But also remember that we're going to be washing this model, so if you get a bit of silver on the red and things like that, don't worry too much, because we've got to wash it still, and we've also got to highlight over it again. So don't worry too much if you get one bit of color on another bit. It's not really a problem. Just take your time with it, and make sure you get all the parts that need to be done. So what I've decided with on this model, and I'm sure most of you will kind of do the same process if you have the same model, is do his plate silver, do obviously the I kind of want to call it thigh armor, because it kind of goes over his thigh. So yeah, thigh armor, his breastplate, his wrists, and his shoulder pads, as well as his helmet silver. So it's quite a lot of silver on this model, so this process obviously does take a bit of time. But the recipe that I have for silver on these models is very, very quick. It's only 2 colors, so it doesn't take much time at all. It works very well, and yeah, you don't have to do loads and loads of different colors just to get a silver. It's just a base color, a wash, and a highlight. So it's very, very nice and quick. So again, just be careful when you're going around everything. Obviously these arm guards have like a rim of something over them, so I decided to paint them gold. Now you can do the whole thing silver if you like, or you can paint the inner part, what I'm painting silver here, gold, and then paint the detail in silver, or you can paint it red. You can do it all different ways. Like I was saying earlier, there's loads of different things you can do with armor on Lannisters, just to kind of make sure that although they're uniform, they're actually got a kind of bit of differentiation between them all, which I like, especially when doing models that actually have a uniform. Kind of like when you do different beard colours and things like that, just to kind of differentiate them, rather than them all looking the exact same like clones, which they're not. So you can see here where I'm kind of doing the shoulder armour, and again, I'm being very careful over these areas, just to make sure that I'm not getting any on the red. I do get some silver on the red here, doesn't make much difference at all, because like I said, we're going to be going over those parts anyway, just to just to highlight them at a later stage, so that's not a problem. So one thing that I like to say when I'm painting models is I'm kind of, when I'm doing any stage of painting, what I kind of do in my head is kind of say to myself, oh, okay, I want silver in this area, gold in this area, and you know, a bit of blue in this area, or something like that. So I'm kind of painting the model with my mind, whilst I'm also painting another part of it with my brush physically. So what you may do when you're painting is decide that, you know, you might decide at the start, okay, I want the helmet to be completely silver. But then when you actually paint the model and you do the breastplates and you do the shoulder pads and you do the arm, you know, the wrist guards and things like that, you might go, actually, if I do the helmet silver, then the model will just look completely silver and it won't really look right. So what I'll actually do is do a bit of silver on the helmet and then a bit of gold on the trimming. So what I'd say as a tip when painting is kind of get a generic idea of what you want to be, what colour when you're painting, just so you can kind of know exactly what process you want to go through straight after you've done the stage that you're doing. So you can see here where I'm kind of, where basically what I've decided is that I'm going to do the main bulk of the helmet silver, but actually leave the detailing, you know, and the front visor gold. Now I decided this because, one, I've not really done this on any of my other guardsmen or Lannister halberdiers, and two, because he's an actual character, it'll actually make him stand out a bit more than you know, them as well. And I know that he obviously stands out anyways because it's a different pose, but adding that extra level of detail to the unit just, you know, adds another level of visual interest. So, you know, if you do any of those little things, it just adds a nice little bit of flavour. And, you know, like I say, I do enjoy painting characters, so these little things I always think about when I'm doing them. So once the silver's done, like I say, it's always a guarantee when you're painting Lannisters to have red, silver and gold. So what we do now is move on to the gold. Now, if you've watched any of my other character videos, what I normally do is I paint a group and then I highlight it up all the way. But for this model and all of my other guards and halberdiers, what I've done is I've kind of done the generic colour group. So I've painted the red, the silver, the gold, the browns, and then after I've done that is I paint a wash over the whole thing. Now, it does work really well, and when I first started painting this army, I just thought I want to get them done as quickly as possible. So a wash, you know, so a base coat, a wash, and a highlight will just be more than acceptable. But as I started painting them more and more, I actually kind of decided that I want to take them to a slightly higher level. So a wash kind of sometimes can take you back a step. So just be careful when you're doing washes over the whole model, because it can kind of take you longer to highlight it up than normal processes would. So that's just something to think about when you're doing a wash. But this is the process that I'm going through on this model, and I've done for my guardsmen and halberdiers as well. So if you want to do the same, you know, emulate the same kind of thing on those models, then you can copy this tutorial as well. And it's, you know, it's obviously going to come out the same because it's the same colours, the same techniques, the same process. So you can, you know, if you think that works well for you, then that's good. So again, when I'm painting the gold, obviously I'll do the same kind of generic thing around the whole model. So because they obviously have a uniform, they have the gold trimming around their tunic kind of thing. Their swords will obviously be gold, and obviously detailing will be gold on them as well. Obviously they have the gold line on their chest. But besides that, those things that I've kind of listed there, everything else is kind of up to you. So you could do a gold helmet if you like, which I have a few gold helmets on my models. You can do gold wrist armor on the inside if you like. You can do gold shoulder pads if you like. That's all personal preference, but just make sure that you go through the whole thing and obviously get all of those parts, the gold that we're painting right now, or the gold that you actually have in your paint set. You can see now, obviously, I'm being very careful with this gold around the hand, because obviously the hand has been, we've spent 15 minutes doing this skin, so you want to be careful when you're doing, you know, doing a base coat around something that's already been completely painted. But, you know, because there's quite a lot of space between the hand and the detailing on the wrist, it's quite easy to kind of pick out those parts that are going to be gold. So just take your time again. It's all obviously it's not a race when you're painting. Take as much time as you need. Try to be as neat as possible. And again, if you're struggling with one size brush, just drop down a size. It makes it a lot easier for you to control. Obviously, sometimes it will take a bit longer for you to paint with a brush that's a lot smaller in size. But if it gives you more control, then it's a lot more useful. Like as you can see here as well, I'm obviously painting the golden lion on his breastplate, and you can kind of see the model already starting to come to life now. Obviously, all of the parts that weren't neat before are kind of being neatened up now as all the base colours are kind of coming into place. And again, you can see where I've kind of decided to do the gold trim around the shoulder pads, which kind of adds another pop of colour to the model as well. Again, I'm being careful around the cloak, even though the cloak's not already done. That's just, so I get a bit of practice in with me being neat with my hands and things like that. But, it doesn't really matter if you get any on the cloak at this point in time. Again, make sure you turn the model and make sure you get everything that needs to be painted this colour. And like I say in all of my videos, it's best to be what's the word? It's best to be kind of painting an order when you're doing models. Methodical. That's the word. Yeah, best to be methodical when you're painting, because what it does is it makes you a lot less prone to missing something out when you're painting. Now, I know it doesn't happen a lot when you're painting, but it may happen a lot to you. Now, it may be because you're not being methodical. Now, what I mean by that is, what I kind of do when I'm painting anything is I always start in the same place. So if I paint, like I say, when I'm painting this model, I start with a face. When I've done the extra highlights, I always start with a face. I didn't go to the hand. I went straight to the face. So when you're doing when I'll do the red, I'll go straight to the tunic at the front again. Or when I do the silver, I'll go straight to the breastplate or the thigh armor. So when you're methodical when you're painting, it just makes it a lot easier for you to know exactly what parts have been done and what parts haven't been done. Now, when I'm talking about being methodical and when you're base coating, what I mean is when you do, most models are generally symmetrical. So one side, the left side of the model is generally the same as the right side, especially on models that have uniform. So what I mean by that is when you do the gold on the left arm, then go to the right arm after. Just means that it's a lot easier for you to kind of get all of it completed without missing anything. So you can see here now where I'm kind of moving to the helmet, and the gold actually works really well on the visor. It may not be kind of realistic or whatever, but I think it works really, really nicely. Again, adds another level of colour to the model, and you can kind of see that if that was silver, it would just be a bit too much silver on the model. So I think it works really well. And I also kind of decided to take the gold obviously all the way around the helmet, just with that detailing, that ridge and things like that. So I think it works really, really nicely, especially we've only done the base coat at this stage and it already looks nice in my eyes anyway. So yeah, I think the gold works really well. So once we've done the gold, it's the same process as any of my other models. I use the brown to do the leather. Now this is the same brown on everything that I've done, so it kind of keeps a uniformity in my models. Even models that aren't in the Lannister Army, like the Brienne that I did, she has this same colour leather for her as well. So if I did put her in one of my units, she wouldn't look out of place in them. Now I understand that leather's not all the same colour, but having a kind of uniform colour, one, makes it a lot easier for you to paint, so you don't have 5 different colours for brown, and two, it just keeps the army uniform without actually being over the top. So using one set of colours for the same kind of process, and I want to say you use that kind of colour brown for all of the leather on the scabbards, and you use a different colour brown for all of the leather on the straps. That's you know, that's the maximum I would go to. Now, if you watch my Mountains Men video, I used a lot of different colours on the strap-ins, the scabbards and things like that. Now that works well for models like that because they're ununiform, but it does take way longer to do that kind of thing, because obviously you're doing 4 colours, 5 colours instead of just 1 or 2. So, you know, it takes 2 times the time or 3 times as long. So if you want to, you know, keep a bit of speed when you're doing models like this, try to keep a uniform colour for certain processes, so it makes it a little easier for you to do. So once all of the base colours are done on the actual main guy, then what we do is we come in with an Agrax Earthshade wash now. Now, be very lenient with this colour. We do not want to make him look insanely dirty. It just adds a depth of colour to him. Now, like I say, when I done my test model for the Lannisters, I just done it as quickly as possible. You know, it took me 45 minutes to do a test Lannister Guardsman, and I've used the same process, more or less, for all of the generic Guardsmen, Halberdiers, and, you know, all of the models that have the same kind of colour scheme on them throughout this whole army. Now, like I say, as I've kind of got to the end of painting this army, I've kind of tried to paint them to a higher level. That's just a natural process when you're doing anything, especially an army where it takes so long to do. But what I kind of do is kind of, instead of slapping this colour on, I'm kind of just tinting the surface. Obviously, I want the wash to be in the recesses, especially in this kind of arm, you know, the red parts of his arm where it kind of has like grooves in it. Obviously, I want the wash to be in the recesses there, obviously, to pick out the detail. Obviously, in the most prominent recesses and things like that, between the armour and things like that. But if you actually look at it, it's not being drowned in this Agrax Earthshade, which is actually a very dark colour if you cover it too thickly on a model. Now, again, you can see me moving very quick this paint, and you can also see how much paint I actually have on my brush there, just to kind of have an actual level of definition and control that you may not normally have if you have a really big brush. Now, be very careful when you're around this skin tone, and don't flick your brush over surfaces, because what you can actually end up doing is getting little droplets of colour onto the skin. And if you'd painted other surfaces, you'd get little droplets onto them, and actually what it would do is just mess up the surface that you've already completely painted. So just be careful when you're doing that. Again, making sure that there's no real pooling anywhere that doesn't need to have pooling. And yeah, that's all that needs to be done at this stage with the wash. So once the wash has been completely dry, and it is very important to make sure everything's completely dry, because it just will mess up the model. All of the stages you've been neat with, you know, everything like that will just be messed up. So just take your time, you know, take half an hour, take an hour if you need to make sure everything's properly dry, and then move on to the first colour. Now, what we're kind of doing now is we're doing the red highlighting, and you can see, like I said, because I started with the thigh area with the red when I've done the base coat, that's the first area that I went to when highlighting. Now, that's just obviously force of habit and things like that, and that's a good habit to have, just to make sure obviously you go through everything methodically. But the reason why I'm doing the red first is because it's underneath other surfaces of the model. So what I mean by that is the red is underneath the armour, as you can see on the you know, the thigh and things like that. The armour surface is over the top of the red. So what you should do is always paint the surfaces underneath something first. So, you know, you always paint the skin before the helmet. You always paint the, you know, if he has socks on, you know, you always paint the sock before the shoe, because the sock is underneath the shoe. So it's just a good process to have. The reason for that is because you're more likely to get paint from a surface that's underneath something onto something that's over the top of it, instead of you getting paint from the surfaces on top of something onto the surfaces underneath. So it's a lot easier. What I mean by that is it's a lot easier to control the paint on a surfaces on top of something. So that's why I do the eyes first on models, because the eye socket is actually further in the head than the skin is. So that's why I do it first, because it's just a lot easier to do that and correct it if you make a mistake. So you can see where I'm kind of being very careful when I'm doing these highlights, and you can see how the Agarac surface shade works really well in this model, because what it's done is it's tint the surface of the model to make it kind of not dirty, but you know, it kind of has a darker shade than it originally did. So it's tinted the surface of the model, and it makes it a lot easier and a lot more sharper when you do the highlights. So obviously I'm being careful around the kind of creases of the arm and things like that. But this red, obviously, like I said before, it's not the best red, but it does come out really nice in this model. And I think it is just the model, because on some of the guys and things like that with this red, I'm not really completely happy with it. But that's just the case with you know, most models when you paint them yourself sometimes. But you can kind of see where I'm kind of redefining the red and things like that. You know, like I say, I want the Lannisters obviously should be kind of tidy. They're uniform. They're a professional army, so their uniform would be kind of well kept, shiny, clean, and things like that. So making this red nice and bright and things like that just works really well on them. So as you can see, I'm kind of using this fine detail brush quite exclusively on this model. Now, when you use a fine detail brush on a model, what it can actually do is kind of deform the paintbrush quite quickly. So you have to be careful when you're painting a model, you know, a 28mm model, a 32mm model with a detail brush, because one, it can take you really long, and two, it can mess up your brushes. But the reason why I'm using this brush is, one, it's not actually really that expensive, and two, it gives me a level of control that not a lot of other brushes can give you. Now, what I'd say is I use this brush and a size 1 brush or a size 0 brush exclusively for everything, because you don't need any other size brushes really. I mean, you can use really fine brushes for the eyes if you want to, but you know, I think that the tip of this brush, even though it's cheap, is more than good enough to do eyes. So I use this brush for the eyes, and then if I'm doing something with a large surface like the cape at a later stage, I'll just use a bigger brush just to do that quicker. But besides that, I use the same brushes on every model all the time. So once the first highlight of the red is finished, this is now the final stage of the red. Now, again, like I say, this is the kind of process that I've done on my normal Guardsman and Lannister Halberdiers. So if you want to go to a higher level with character or things like that, what you can do is put a bit of orange in, just to add another bit of you know, another level of highlighting to the red, which would work really nice. Obviously, don't go too over the top with orange on red, because these are Lannisters, their colours are red, not orange. So just be careful when you're doing things like that if you want to do you know, a nice bright highlight like that. But what you also can notice at this stage is that because I'm using a very bright colour, the stage actually doesn't take that long for me to do. Now, I'm just picking out the most prominent recesses, sorry, not the most prominent recesses, the most prominent edges, you know, just to kind of get a nice level of, you know, nice level of highlight on. And, you know, you can see how much although I've only used 3 colours for this stage, it just kind of brings out the detail really nice. So this colour, you know, like I say, it's not the greatest colour, but it does work really nicely when you actually get a nice even coat on and things like that. So if you want to use this colour, then go ahead and do it. If you don't have it, but it does take a bit of time to cover over black. So just be mindful of that. Again, you can see me kind of turning the model just to make sure that I get all of these little minute parts of detail, just so that I'm not missing anything. You know, it's quite frustrating if you miss a minor little detail and then look at it once you've painted it and go, oh, I've missed that part. But yeah, you know, if you take your time with it, you can kind of make sure that you don't forget anything. You can see how little paint I actually have on my brush at these stages. Now, like I say, when you have less paint on a brush, it gives you a lot more control. So actually, it's more important to make sure that the amount of paint on your brush is regulated, rather than, you know, the consistency of the paint that you're using. So that's the red now done. And what I kind of do now is decide to do the brown. Now, I did do the brown last on the model when I was doing their base colours, but I decided to do the brown now. The reason for that is because it's over the top of silver, and it's actually quite a quick process. So if I get any of the brown on the silver, it's a lot easier for me to correct it, and I kind of trust my my painting hand. So I kind of know that I'm not really going to get any of this brown onto the silver or anything like that. So yeah, I'll go ahead and do this first. But what I would say is obviously do the colours, do the surfaces that are underneath another surface first, just so that if you don't have complete control of your brush, or if you're not fully happy with the level of control that you do have, if you do make a mistake, it's a lot easier to correct at a later stage. But you can see obviously the what I'm doing with the scabbard here is I'm kind of doing the edges of the edges of it, just to kind of leave that little darker gap in the middle, obviously to create that kind of shade and highlight. Again, it's a nice quick process. It's not completely natural, but for a tabletop miniature, that I'm not spending 5 hours doing, it works really, really well. So once that's the first highlight's done, again, we just move on to the last highlight. And what you can see here as well is that I used 6 different skin colors on, six different colors on the skin. But what I'm doing with the rest of the model is only using 3 colors, like a base, a mid-tone, and a highlight. So you can see how, although I did spend a lot of time on the skin, with the rest of the model, you don't need to have loads and loads of different processes to make it a nice looking tabletop standard miniature. So 3 colors works more than well enough for most things. So you don't have to go crazy with the highlights every single time you do a miniature. 3 colors I'd say is the minimum, really. If you want to be very, very quick, then a base color and then a wash works fine most times. Especially for like free folk and things like that. But we're not painting them at the moment. So once we do the brown, obviously you can see me kind of moving on to the silver parts now. Now, like I said before, this silver is very, very quick. It's just the base color, the wash, and then the highlight. So this is the final color of the silver. Now, it's very important to understand that this is the final color of the silver, because what we're going to be doing now is kind of creating a kind of shininess to the armor, because like I said before, these Lannisters are professional soldiers. Their armor would be well kept. Their uniform is uniform. So there's a kind of consistency that they would like to have in the army, especially because they're all professionals and things like that. So what I'm kind of doing with this silver is creating a nice brushed, polished surface on the plates. Now, it's a lot easier to create a nice polished silver on flat surfaces like plate, breastplates, shoulder pads, things like that, because they're all flat surfaces. So you can kind of see what I'm doing is I'm kind of using a feathering technique to kind of create a polished surface. Now, you can already see just on the firearmor what the kind of silver is going to look like on the rest of the model. Now, again, it's very, very quick. It's not a lot of it's not very technical or anything like that, but it's very, very effective what I'm doing with the silver here. Now, feathering is obviously a technique that I've kind of talked about quite a lot in my videos, and I do think it's one of the most important techniques any painter can use at any stage of painting, whether they're professional or newly into the hobby. But essentially what it is just creating a level of highlight in one specific area, so a line of highlight, and then using your brush really quickly to blend out that level of highlight into the darker surface around it, just to create a nice smooth transition. Now, I've talked about this in loads of my other videos, so if you want to watch the other videos just to kind of get another generic idea of where you can use feathering, what feathering is, and things like that, I think I've talked about it in all of the videos that I've done. I think this is my 8th video now, so yeah, I think maybe in one I didn't talk about it. So in 7 of my videos, at least I've talked about feathering, because it is the most important technique. So get a good understanding of what feathering is, watch other YouTube videos, do a bit of research yourself just to kind of understand what feathering is, because it is so important to create nice smooth transitions of colour when you're painting a flat surface. So moving on from the explanation of what feathering is, you can kind of see how the armour is being brought up really, really nicely now, you know, and although it's very, very quick process, it's of utmost importance to make sure that you leave some of that agrite surf shade in the recesses. Now, what that does is it leaves, obviously, the shading, and it kind of creates that stark highlight, you know, the most brightest color in comparison to the darkest shade, which is obviously the agrite surf shade in the recess. Now, it is very, very important to leave that shading in the recess. If you do make a mistake and get a bit of silver in the recess, what I'd suggest doing is going over with a dark brown, you know, the darkest brown that you have, and then painting it into the recess, because it will kind of emulate obviously the agrite surf shade being in the recess. Now, if it kind of looks a bit out of place, what you can do is obviously paint that recess in, you know, that brown colour that you use, and then just do another thin wash in the recess only with agrite surf shade again, just to kind of tie in all the colours, and that should work fine, just to kind of you know, fix that mistake that you may have made. You know, if you're particularly confident with your skills with a paintbrush, then what you can do is just do a nice thin black line in the gap, and that should do a nice, you know, that should create a nice easy transition of, you know, creating that shade again. So you can see I'm kind of feathering out on these shoulder pads again, and you can see how quickly the colour kind of blends in with the other thing around it. You know, it looks like a polished surface straight away, nice smooth transition, and obviously metallic colours have a natural shine to them. So what it kind of creates is a natural highlight and shade. So that's why I think only doing a base colour and a highlight works really well on the vast majority of models, because you don't have to go crazy with doing all these really, really bright highlights, because it creates a natural highlight anyway. So we're getting to the final stages of this silver on the model now. You know, we've got the helmet left to do. But what you may have noticed is I've not done the blade of the halberd. Now, I've talked about this in some of my other videos, and what I tend to do is choose a point of contact when I'm painting. Now, obviously in this model, it's the halberd, the top of the halberd. It may also sometimes be the feathers on his helmet. Now, if I have a point of contact on surfaces like this, what I tend to do is wait until the end, after everything else is painted, to repaint it, and, you know, complete it. Now, the reason for that is, obviously, if I had that point of contact on this model and I painted it silver at the start, and I was highlighting it up now, if I then went on to highlight something else and was using that point of contact again, what I do, or all I do, is just rub off the paint from that surface. Now, that would just be going back on myself. So it's best to kind of use a point of contact on a model, and then wait until the end of the model is completed to then go back to paint that surface. It's just, I personally find it a lot easier to do that. A lot of you may think it's a backwards process, so do it any way that you like. Obviously, I'm going to be using a paint handle in one of my videos just to talk about the pros and cons of that and things like that. This is actually going to be the video after this, so you'll see that in a later video. But I'm so used to painting just with no brush handle. Sorry, not brush handle. You know, painting handle. So if you do use a painting handle, then that's fine, but I just find it easier to do it this way. So once the silver's done, obviously we're moving on to the detailing now. Now, with the gold, I'm being very, very lenient. Now, I found it very, very quick not to even highlight most of these parts with gold. Now, you know, you can kind of see how I'm quickly just going over the surface. I'm not going around everything completely, because, you know, gold is a very, very bright colour, and it doesn't always get hit by, you know, there's certain areas on this model that aren't getting hit by light or things like that, or what would be hit by light if it was an actual standing person. So I'm not going too crazy with going over the top with highlights with this gold, but what I'm kind of obviously doing is making sure that I do go over all of the parts, just to kind of make sure that the gold gets you know, the shine of the gold is actually emulated on the model because we've done the Agrax surf shade wash, and that dulled down the initial base coat of the model. Now, that's the most important part. Obviously, you want the gold on this model to shine, but besides that, just be lenient with this. Obviously, when you're lenient with a highlight and you have a shaded color underneath, what it does is it picks out detail a lot more, so you can kind of see what you're kind of trying to do with the color that you're highlighting. So just be reserved when you're doing highlights of gold. Obviously, again, making sure that you're being careful around everything else now, because we've essentially already painted all of this model now. All of the actual, body. So just be careful again around the hands and things like that. Now, because this the detailing on the parts that I'm painting is kind of quite sharp and raised, what you can do is use the side of your brush to do a kind of really bright edge highlight. It's a lot easier technique rather than painting straight. So all you have to do is just get a bit of paint in your brush, not too much, and then just drag the side of your bristles over that surface, and it just creates a nice, smooth, quick highlight. Again, you can kind of see where I kind of go from one arm to the other just to kind of keep myself methodical and things like that. Again, I'm not going all the way around the gold detailing on the wrist arm and things like that, because that creates a kind of transition of dark colour to bright colour on the tips of the armour and things like that. Again, remember, when you're highlighting, you don't want to go all the way, you don't want to go over the whole surface with this new highlight colour. You want to be leaving some of the darkest colour in the recesses to create a smooth transition of, shade to highlight. You can see as well where I kind of had a bit too much paint on a brush, especially on an area of the model like this where the surface is very, very fine. So just take your time with it. It's not a race when you're painting, so patience is key when you're painting, or patience is is important if you're trying to get to the next level of painting. Now, I think that's one thing that I need to practice on myself, patience. I can't paint all models in one day. It's always nice to get one model painted a day or things like that, but if it takes you longer than you may have thought, then just put the model down and wait a day or something like that. This video is an hour and 15 minutes long. So it's an hour and 15 minutes long. Obviously, with drying times and things like that, it's probably taken me 2 to 2.5 hours to actually paint this model. So you see all these painting tutorials and it's actually like, oh yeah, I painted this model in an hour, or I painted this model in 30 minutes. But actually, what about priming time? What about basing? What about drying time for paints? It doesn't actually take someone 30 minutes to do most models, or it didn't take me an hour and 15 minutes to paint this model. It actually took me 2 hours to do this model. 2.5 hours, because I've not thought about the basing on the model and things like that. So just think about that when you're painting, obviously. But I think for the amount of time I've put into this model, it came out really, really nicely. Obviously, you may have your own opinions about this, but personally, I think this is one of my favourites from the starter set, for sure. So what we're doing now is priming the black areas on the model black again. So what I mean by that is the boots and the basically the boots. If I got any gold or anything like that on whilst I was painting, what I'm kind of just doing now is going over those areas just to kind of redefine that surface that I want to be black. So that obviously includes here the sword handle. Again, you can kind of see where I've got a bit of skin tone on there, or things like that. If you didn't get any black on these black surfaces, then any colour on these black surfaces, and you don't have to do this stage. But I'll be very surprised if you didn't. But yeah, just use this black to kind of redefine the surface that you want to be black again, and don't go too over the top with it, because what we've done is we've already washed this surface, so it may look different to the black that's already on the model. So just be lenient with this colour. It shouldn't take you too long to do it, as it didn't really take me long there. And I just leave the black surface like that. I think I did actually go back at a later stage just to highlight it up again, but it's another stage of painting that doesn't need to be done. You don't look at the shoes when you're painting, and because the black, the model's kind of shiny, kind of has a satin finish to it, you kind of have a natural kind of highlight on the black anyway. So don't highlight black if you don't need to. It's just another step that takes longer than is actually worth it sometimes. So once the actual main guy is done, more or less, I'll move on to the cape now. Now, in most of my other videos, what I've kind of done is use this darker red on the capes and things like that, just to kind of show that this is an actual character model and things like that. This is a higher rank than everything else. Now, if you've done a darker red on your actual Lannister guardsmen or halberdiers, then it might be nice to do like a brighter red on the capes, or or leave the cape red, or make it white, or things like that. There's loads of different things you can do. But what I've kind of decided on my models is to do a dark red. It works really well. I feel like darker colours just feel more have a higher status and things like that. So I think it works really well. Now, as I was mentioning before, you can see that I'm using a different brush now. This is the larger brush, and I think this is the only time I've used this large brush, besides a wash earlier on. But you can see how it's a lot more useful than if I was just using the fine detail brush to paint it. If you have a bigger brush, obviously use this to base coat the cloak. But again, we've painted most of the model now, so be careful when you're going around the surfaces where another part's already been painted. So around the scabbard, around the shoulder pads, most importantly. So take your time. If you need to swap to a detailed brush around those areas, swap to a detailed brush. Don't be lazy with painting at this stage, because you've spent so much time doing it already that there's no point in just being lazy and messing up something just because you can't be asked to change your brush. So if you need to change your brush because you don't have enough control, then change your brush. It will always be more beneficial to you because it will save you time fixing a mistake that you have made. Again, you can see I'm kind of being very, very careful there. This brush obviously is a large brush, but it has a nice tip on it anyway, so I do have a level of control on it that some people may not have with other brushes. So again, just take your time with it. Make sure you go all the way around. You can just kind of see how the kind of cloak folds all the way around his neck and things like that as well. So just go all the way around there. Don't forget anything. And make sure it's properly base coated. So with the cloak base coat now done, what we're kind of doing now is the highlighting on it. Obviously, this is obviously a darker red in comparison to all the other, the red that we've used on the actual main guy. Now you can see how dark that initial colour came out. Now I think what I'm doing at this stage is kind of doing a little mix of 50-50 from that initial base colour to this colour that I've just shown. So the black red is mixed 50-50 with this red colour that I'm using now, and what that does is, instead of creating a very, very bright highlight, is it creates a much more smooth mid-tone. So the cloth actually looks a lot more realistic. Now you want this obviously to be watered down well enough so that it kind of has a nice coverage but doesn't look gritty on the surface. So you can kind of see how the paint that I'm using is going on, and where I'm kind of leaving the darkest tones. Now obviously this is all up to you. You can kind of do it in your own way if you like to. Now, because I've done this cloak the same way on essentially all of my character models that have cloaks, Jaime Lannister is one that I've done the same process on. Guard captains, I've the Kickstarter guard captain, and also the assault veterans in the attachments box. It's the same. I've used the exact same process. So I kind of have it kind of down to a kind of recipe that I always use. Now, because I do a mixture of 50-50, or what I think is 50-50, the red may seem different on different models, and that's good because I like to have a kind of differentiation between certain colours. Now, the colours that I'm using are obviously the same in the end, but if you have a different mix, say a 60-40 mix of one colour to another colour, it'll actually create a slightly different tone than a 50-50 mix would, obviously. So, when I'm talking about mixes and things like that, it's obviously all up to you what you think works best for you at the time. But generally, when you're doing a mix of two colours, 50-50 is always the preferred ratio to go with, because it just works best. It creates a nice mid-tone, and also it doesn't take you forever to get from one colour to a highlight colour later on. So just take your time with it. And as you can see on this model, this cape has so much nice detail on it. You know, there's so many creases and things like that. So it's very, very easy for you to see exactly where you want these brighter highlights to go. Now, because I'm actually only doing a mid-tone between the first colour, the first base coat and the first highlight, what I'm doing is being quite lenient with where I'm placing these highlights, because I know that I'm going to be going brighter at a later stage. So what I'm only leaving the darkest recesses, this initial black-red base colour. So you may be looking at me and thinking, well, you're going a bit too bright in certain areas there, or leaving not leaving enough dark tone in the recess. But you'll see at a later stage how this kind of colour blends up nice and slowly to create a nice smooth transition of colour. Now, I don't go super bright with this cape, but I don't want it to kind of overtake the rest of the model. I just want it to be another level of detail that you kind of get drawn to. But you can kind of see on the front of the cape how it kind of this mid-tone kind of creates a nice smooth transition, rather than it being a very, very bright contrast between the first colour. So if you want to redefine colour, or make it a lot more not more defined with the colour, then you can go over it another time just to kind of redefine the colour. So once the mid-tone's done, you can see I'm not showing another paint now, because what I'm doing is just using the flat red colour, just obviously watered down. So now obviously that actually counts as the first actual colour. Now you can see now that although it's highlighting the colour that I've already put on, it's not creating a very, very bright contrast. Now, if I just used this colour initially and didn't do a mid-tone, you can see how much of a difference it would have made, and it wouldn't have been an easy transition of colour. It wouldn't have been easy for me to create a smooth blend. It wouldn't have been easy for me to highlight, and it would look a lot more gritty and a lot more unrealistic as a highlight. So you can see why doing a 50-50 mix of a mid-tone actually works well in certain instances, if the colours are very, very different from one another. If one stage is different to another, then if one stage is so different to another stage, then creating a nice smooth 50-50 blend as a mid-tone works really, really nicely. Now, this colour that I'm using now, this red, isn't much different to the highlight colour, the carmine red, that I'm going to be using at a later stage to do a final edge highlight. Now, it would be perfectly fine to do a straight highlight straight out of the bottle, obviously with a watered down, with it being watered down. But it would be more than fine to do a straight out of the bottle highlight, because the colours aren't completely different. It's just a little bit of extra colour added in just to create a little bit brighter. But it was a lot more important to create a 50-50 mix of the base colour and the first highlight to create a smoother blend. You can see now how I'm kind of defining these creases a lot more with this colour, being a lot more harsh with the areas that are having this highlight now. So again, this is all personal preference. You can kind of do it how you like. I'm just kind of doing it. Again, I've never painted this model before, so I'm kind of just doing it by eye, what I think looks right. Again, you can see me turning the model quite a lot there to see how the natural light of my of my painting lights kind of hit the model, just to see exactly where the darkness is and the brightness is, and kind of doing it naturally with normal light. So use the normal light that you have around you, just to make it easy for you to see exactly how normal highlights would look on this model. You can kind of see now, it's slowly building up. You can kind of see the mid-tones, you can see the base colour and things like that, and it kind of looks really nice. Nothing's really standing out colour-wise, but this is where this kind of final edge highlight kind of brings out all of the surfaces, makes it a lot more brighter, picks out the definition a lot more. Again, you can see how this red isn't obviously insanely bright in comparison to the last colour that I used, but I'm being very careful with it. I'm being a lot more reserved with it, because it can overpower the surface that I've already painted. So be careful when you're doing an extreme highlight or what you think may be the final highlight of a surface, because you don't want to go over the top of it, because it will just you know, kind of defeat the point of you kind of blending up earlier on with, you know, slowly shading and blending and things like that, because, you know, you've just gone too bright with it. So take your time with this, be very careful. Again, you can see how I'm kind of switched back to this, you know, more detailed brush now, just to kind of get a lot more control in these areas. And yeah, you know, taking my time. You can kind of see where I'm kind of following the most prominent creases first, and then everything else kind of builds up from that. You can kind of see, again, like I say, the colour's not insanely bright in comparison to everything else that I've already done, but I'm still being careful not to kind of let it overpower anything else. So I'm kind of feathering it out just to kind of create a much smoother transition of colour. Now, I mentioned this, I think, in my Jaime Lannister video. Because I'm using the same colour red on the cloaks as I am with the characters, you know, like Jaime Lannister. I don't want this red to be overpowering, in comparison to his cloak. So on his cloak, I kind of go to another level with orange. Now, I don't do that on this model, and I think it works out fine. But if you want to take it to another level, then you can go and paint like a very fine orange, just to kind of highlight it to another level. Now, this is seen in my Jaime Lannister video, so if you want to see that, then go ahead and check that video out. But for now, we're moving on to the actual halberd. This is again the final part, the halberd and the feather. So this is a very quick level. It's the same process that I use for all of the halberds in my army. You know, anything that has a kind of pole-like armament. So the lances of my Knights of Cassidy Rock, the pole for the banners and things like that. This is all the same process. So again, just be careful. Get a nice even coat on it, and follow it all the way around so that there's no black, because that won't look right. You can kind of see me there, kind of getting in really, really close, so I can see exactly what I'm trying to do. And also as well, there's kind of like where the top of the halberd gets joined onto the pole. There's actually, you can kind of see some of the wood there as well. So just don't forget that as well. That's a minute little detail, but it's important to kind of you know, not to forget these little details and things like that. And you can kind of see on the back of the cloak there where the red actually works pretty well. So yeah, I'm happy with how it came out. So that's the base coat of the halberd done, and this is the highlight. Again, just one highlight of the halberd. We're not going too crazy. It doesn't need to have loads of different processes, and this is a very, very quick stage. What I do when I'm highlighting a model is I pick up the model, and as it looks straight in front of me, that's where I do the highlight. Now, when you're painting a pole arm or things like that, you can go all the way around doing, you know, leaving a gap of dark and then doing a line of bright, you know, sorry, a line of highlight again. So you can do that if you like, but I'm not going, you know, I don't go too over the top with this. So I just do one line in one area, one line from behind, and then that's the highlight done for the halberd. So because I'm still using the contact point from the top of the halberd's blade, I now do the feather on the assault veteran. So on other models, what I've actually done is I've painted this either black or red. Now, I decided to do this one white because I just think it brings out another level of detail to the model. I've not done this on any of my other ones, so he is unique, but I'm very, very happy with my choice of colour here. Now, if you're not confident with doing white, don't be put off by this, because this is a very, very easy way to do white. Now, it is essentially just a grey base coat, which is what I'm doing now. Again, doing a nice even coverage. Now, it's very important when painting white to get a nice even undercoat, because when you paint white over the top, you can see the colour underneath. So you just want that to be a solid grey colour, or a solid, you know, a bright grey. So make sure it's solid, make sure it goes all the way down to the edge. Obviously, be careful not to get on any parts that you've already painted. And if you need to, go over it with two colours just to create a more solid colour. This colour is called Arctic White. It's just white. and what I'm kind of doing now is just watering it down a little bit. And what you can kind of see me doing is using the tip of my brush, and I'm kind of you can kind of see that edge of the the middle of the feather that you see. And then what I kind of do now is use the tip of my brush and then just kind of flick the edge, and you can kind of see me kind of doing this, this flicking motion. And what it does is it kind of leaves a little bit of a gap of grey in between, certain parts, just to kind of insinuate, show that there is kind of a surface. This is a feather surface. Now, it's not the most refined technique. It's not an advanced technique, but it emulates the fact that this surface is a feather. Now, you can see the white doesn't have complete coverage over the grey or anything like that. That's fine, because you can go over this colour as much as you like, just with white again if you want to, just to kind of redefine the fact that this surface is white. Now, again, this is a very, very quick process. If you're scared of white, don't be, because it's a very, very quick way to do it. But yeah, you can kind of see me doing the same process again. I'm kind of turning the brush and then just flicking it, leaving a bit of a gap in between, and then leaving some of that grey underneath to kind of show that this is a feather. And that is that is how quick this can be. So if you're doing a different colour, then obviously, if you're doing a red feather, then do it red. If you're doing it black, then do it black. You can kind of see, nice and quickly, completed really quickly, and it works really well. I think I might have gone over it actually one more time with white, just to kind of redefine, just to make it a lot more brighter. But it didn't take me too long, and now we're moving on to the final part, which is the actual blade of the halberd. Now, at this stage, what I generally do is do a quick spray of varnish over the model. Now, the reason why I do that is because I don't want to accidentally touch any of the model and kind of rub off any of the paint that I've already done, because that would just be frustrating. So a quick spray of varnish, make sure it's dry, and then go onto the blade. Now you can kind of see I'm kind of touching the top of the halberd right until the end, because I don't need to touch anything else until I've actually painted that. So just be careful. Again, we've painted the whole model now, so take your time. Make sure the brush isn't flicking anywhere, so that you get tiny, minute little dots of silver paint on the cloak, or his face or anything like that. Take your time. A nice smooth surface. It all takes time. You can kind of see how I'm going nice and slow with this, and you can also see I'm kind of using my bigger brush here just to kind of get a lot more paint on. But because it's got a nice tip on it, I still have control. Yeah, so get a nice even base coat on with this, and once I do that, I just kind of hold the base of the model and then just paint the tip of the halberd all the way up, nice and easy. Again, turning the model, making sure I don't forget anything. Obviously, there's not much to forget on this, but you can still miss a part, so make sure you get all the edges and things like that. On plastic models as well, make sure you get all the edges, because sometimes you can get a bit of flash on the edge and things like that, and you actually end up missing part of it. So just make sure you do that. Now with this blade, I'm using Nuln Oil now, which is a black wash. I do this on a lot of my metallics. Now, Nuln Oil is really nice on any metallics. Just adds that other level of definition to the surface. And again, it doesn't make the blade look dirty. They're not rusty blades. They're a professional army. So all you're doing with this wash is kind of just defining the detail on the halberd. The actual axe surface, the actual pick on the back of it, and the actual spear point as well. So again, it's a nice quick process. Make sure there's no pooling, and we'll move on to the actual highlight. Now this is very, very quick. Again, it's the same process for all my armor, all my blades. I just use two colors. You can kind of see how that surface is kind of dulled down now. It's kind of like a matte kind of, or it's more satin than matte, but you can kind of see how the kind of definition is quite easy to see. So I'm kind of picking out those details, leaving a bit of the darker color on the flatter surfaces. So on the flatter surfaces of it, so I kind of can see the kind of shine, the natural shine that this colour creates, and it works really, really nicely. So again, what I kind of do is I go around the edges of the surface first, And it just, what it does is it just makes it easier for me to see exactly what I'm kind of trying to do with the highlights. And there you can kind of see what I'm kind of doing there is feathering out the colour just to kind of blend it with the darker colour around. Again, you can see me doing that there, feathering it out. Again, don't paint the whole surface this new colour, because what it will do is it just defeat the point of you doing a normal oil wash. And again, define the edges of this the blade so that you don't forget anything. You can see this is quite a nice satisfying process, because it's the last part of the model, and you know, it's a very quick stage. Just take your time with it. The definition on this halberd is really nice. Obviously the spear point obviously has like kind of 4 edges, so nice and easy for you to kind of highlight that. All you have to do is kind of use the side of your brush and just drag it down. Nice and easy. And again, we're doing the exact same process on this side of the blade, then you know, this side of the axe head and the pick, as I did on the other side. Just obviously not forgetting to kind of merge in those 2 highlights on either side. Kind of see how I kind of leave that nice little black, you know, that darker area. That just adds a nice little definition of shading, you know. And again, the same kind of process on the axe side, just feathering out the top, you know, leaving a bit of the dark colour on the bottom as is natural, and again following the top of the detail, feathering it out again just to make sure everything looks more realistic. And now we're moving on to just the final parts, and you know, turning it again, making sure it's all okay, and that's the model done. So with a quick bit of basing, this is the halberdier done. Now you can see the basing obviously works really well. I'm very happy with how this turned out. This is one of my, like I say, this is one of my favourite models from the starter set, and you can see how the kind of black rim on the base works really well. It just offsets the model and keeps it nice and neat. And again, as shown at the start of the video, this is him in the halberdiers, the perfect attachment for halberdiers, and you can see how the red cloak works nicely in comparison to the rest of the halberdier models, and you can see how I've kind of used the same red on all of them, and you know, it works really well. So yeah, you know, nice and simple. You can see how I've kind of got different gold areas on all of the different models as well. So if you like this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and don't forget to paint and play.